Hey, welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Burdinsky, and somewhere sharing that split screen with me is Riley O'Connell. Riley, welcome back to Citizen Mike Show. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me again, Mike.
Yeah, so it seems like the election, the municipal election of 2021 was like centuries ago. I mean, it just seems so long. I don't know. But does it seem that way to you after your hard fought campaign that that's so far in the past?
It's a bit of a paradox because it simultaneously feels like it was yesterday, but also feels like it was a lifetime ago. So hard to say, but
Yeah. So speaking of a lifetime ago, a lot of things have happened since you and I have talked. I think, just before the election, we've had developments on ARPA. We've had kerfuffles and dust up about community pool. We've had the mayor's budget, the council's budget, um, discussions ad nauseum about ARPA, and Vinny Testa announced that he was going to run for mayor on the Citizen Mike Show. I think we scooped the Record Journal. Anyway, sort of, look back a little bit and tell me where your thoughts are on any of the things that I just mentioned.
well, I'll say first on the fact that you said a lot has happened. I think a lot has been talked about. I don't know if a lot has necessarily happened. There's a lot of chatter, but nothing really seems to change that much in town in general. ARPA funds are a great example of that. But in terms of the Vinny announcing that he's running for mayor, I'm very happy for him. But I'm also going to take this opportunity to give you a second first scoop of the news that I am also officially announcing that I'm running for the Democratic nomination for mayor as well. So I'm happy to give your show two first-time scoops.
We appreciate that. We appreciate that. But that raises the question, that everyone would ask, wait a minute. The election is a year and a half away. We have two Democrats want to unseat Mayor Dickinson. What is the process? I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear from you. What is the process where the town or the Democrats narrows the field so that there's one candidate going against Mayor Dickinson on November 2023?
Sure. So I'll start just strictly procedurally, right? So in sometime next summer, next spring, the Democratic Town Committee, which consists about of 100 plus 115 or something elected Democrats in town, will get to decide in a vote who they want their endorsed candidate to be. Now, past that, anyone can still petition on, force a primary in which any Democrat in town can vote. And whoever would win that in that case, if there is a forced primary, would be the person to go against Dickinson or whoever is the Republican nominee next time around. Now, personally, I'll say that, look, me and Vinny, Vinny's a good friend of mine. In a lot of ways, has been a role model throughout me getting involved in politics. I mean, he's been a public servant, a dedicated public servant to this town longer than I've been alive, right? So I think it goes without saying that, if he wins the nomination, he will absolutely have my support, and I'm sure it's the other way around. At the same time, I obviously wouldn't be running, of course, if I didn't think, one, I was the best person for the job, and I'm not just talking about Vinny, I'm talking about for everyone in the field, potentially in the field, I should say, and two, that I think I have a very good shot, if not the best shot, of actually winning that election.
All right,
all those things can simultaneously be true, right? Vinny would be a fantastic mayor, certainly a huge improvement over the current administration we have.
I want to back up, and I think I know what you're saying, but I'm not real sure. It goes in front of the town committee first, right? We agree on that.
Right, correct.
The town committee, it would be a new town committee, I believe.
It'd be the one we currently have now.
Okay. All right. And so are you saying that the way you read the votes on the town committee, that you would get the nomination, that maybe Testa would get the nomination, or it's a toss-up?
I mean, we'll see. It's not really me to say. I mean, again, I haven't even polled the town committee because, this is my first announcement that I'm running, although I'm sure many people have put two and two together at this point. So I guess it's not for me to decide. I wouldn't be running if I wasn't confident in our chances to get the nomination, and more importantly, to win the general election. And the way I see it, if you have a respectful civil debate over who you want your candidate to be, when you have multiple good options in this case, I think that can only be a good thing for the party and for Wallingford in general, because, right, the most important thing for healthy democracy is choices, right? And I think that's frankly my biggest complaint, and where most of the issues in our town today stem from, is the fact that the RTC traditionally does not function that way. The Republican Town Committee, I'll say, because usually it's decided behind the scenes who's going to be the nominee. And at least Mayor Dickinson has not been primaried in my lifetime. I don't know if he's ever been primaried. And I think that lack of options for either party holds us back.
Yeah. So on the issue of options, if the town committee nominates Vinny Testa, would you primary?
I doubt it. I haven't thought that far ahead. I mean, I think, like I said, whether it's me or Vinny.
Let's think about it now. Let's think about it now. Because, let's think about it now. It's, would you primary?
I wouldn't be planning on primary. No, I think, assuming the process is run fairly, which I have no doubt it would be, if it's run the way that it's been done in the past, then no, I wouldn't necessarily see a reason to. And I don't think Vinny would either. We would have to chat about it more directly. But I think we both have, while we have slightly different platforms, we have the same goal, which is to kind of bring Wallingford to the next step where it should be, and frankly, where it should have been 20, 30 years ago.
So speaking of platforms, is there a difference between your approach to governance and Vinny Testa's approach for governance? And let me rephrase that before you launch into your answer. This gives you time to think for a minute.
All right.
When you make your pitch, to the Democratic Town Committee, is it going to be a pitch that's sort of bland, that there's no difference between me and Vinny Testa? We stand for the same things. We want for the best for Wallingford. We're interested in reasonable taxes, so on, blah, 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 pablum, pablum, pablum. Or is there any distinctions between you and Vinny Testa that you would publicly express?
No, I think it's a fair question. And first of all, I should preface, sorry if you hear my dog in the background. He decides this conversation is the perfect time to run around.
You and I both love dogs. We got
great. Great. Maybe you might even make an appearance behind me if I'm not paying attention. But no, it's a fair question in terms of what's different between me and Vinny Testa. I think a lot is. I think, like I said, our overall philosophy of bringing the town forward is the same. But I think we saw this with my last election, in the fact that we got closer than any Democrat has in 30 years since my friend Peter Gouveia ran. And by a decent margin too, right? It was, no one had gotten within 1,000 votes and we got almost within 300. And I think that speaks, partially to the hard work that me and my team did, but even more so to kind of what we awakened in the Wallingford community by what our policies were, what we were talking about. I think everyone came on the same page, and frankly, my platform's very similar, if not identical last time, maybe a few more details to certain areas added, but the message hasn't changed. In a lot of ways, a lot of the things, and maybe funny enough, the last time I was on your show was the day after the election, when I was still bags under my eyes and barely awake, but you dragged me onto the show anyway. And I said, I hope this election's a wake-up call for Mayor Dickinson, but I doubt it will be. And the things I listed off, I think, were taxes are going to be proposed to be raised again. Nothing will happen with community pool. Nothing will happen with the ARPA money. It'll be playing politics with that. And I'm sure I might have mentioned a couple other things. And that's exactly where we are today. I mean, granted, it's only been 6 or 7 months, but the challenges are only getting steeper, right, with each passing time, unfortunately.
This is going to be the last time I'm going to ask the question. I'll just rephrase it a little bit. And then
okay.
I agree with you that we'll move on. What I was trying to get out was, are there any differences between you and Vinny Testa? Other than you think you have a better chance of winning because of your record, because of the election results, from 2021?
No, I think it's a good question. I mean, it's more nuanced, I guess, 'cause I'm so used to answering what makes me and Mayor Dickinson different, which is almost everything under the sun. Versus what makes me, there's a lot different about us, right? I mean, me and Vinny are from very different generations. We have completely different ways of going about things. You can see that from the way I ran my campaign, the way that Vinny, runs the town council from his position, or, works in the town council. In terms of specific policies, I haven't seen Vinny's platform yet. I mean, it's early. It's not anything on Vinny. I'm sure we will get an in-depth platform from him, but I think I'll have to wait for that before I really know for sure.
Okay. Let's talk about your candidacy against Mayor Dickinson and get some brief some brief bullets on that. Now, what's been in the news in the last week or so is the budget. The mayor has been relatively consistent with his approach to the budget. And one could argue that his consistency has got him reelected time and time and time again, in spite of the fact that probably in each budget that I can recall, there's always been some sort of a tax increase, either from revaluation or from mill rate increases. And so does that consistency work for him? Or are you going to put up, present another approach to budgets that will get you a victory? Yeah.
And I think it's less the mayor's consistency with his budgets and more his very successful messaging that gets him reelected all the time, because folks don't realize, I mean, you were kind of giving him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there when you said, you can't remember the last time we didn't have a tax increase either from increasing the mill rate or reevaluations. Even if you take out reevaluations, this year's budget that just passed officially last night is the 17th year in a row that he proposed a tax increase just off the mill rate, let alone reevaluation. But people don't always seem to realize that, I think, is part of the strategy.
Well, how is your campaign going to be different? Specifically, are you going to promise a no mill rate increase if you're elected?
Yeah, I mean, we promised that last time, at least for the near future. That's something we can easily, it's something that can very possibly be done. And we saw that with the budget that the town council was able to put together. That included a tax decrease. Now, I think they should have just gone for a freeze because the decrease was close to insignificant, where it seemed a little more grandstanding, but the increase is not insignificant. We're talking about, I believe it's half a mill rate or 0.6 mill rates. So, it's doable. And I think the way that I would do it, because I definitely think the town council's version of the budget was a big improvement from the mayor's version, but I still think it's far from perfect. Not the least of which, I don't like that it cut part of the Board of Ed's budget, even if it was just contingency. We've already seen the past 2.5 years that they've needed to rely on contingency more than ever. But more than that, I think the focus is twofold. And I don't want to go too much in depth because it'll take me all night. But basically, and it sounds overly simplistic, but cutting out inefficiencies, right, which is how you reduce expenditures, while at the same time increasing revenue, not by raising the mill rate, but by raising the property values from those reevaluations. Because then even if people are paying more in taxes, at least they're experiencing more of a net worth increase. Like, there's much more value to that. And frankly, our property values have lagged well behind in terms of the change in property values have lagged way behind our neighboring towns.
I get it that you would freeze taxes the first time you have a chance to, but after the first year, is that a sustainable position? We don't want you to invite you on the Citizen Mike show and you make promises that you can't keep it, so on and so forth. But is that a 1 year forecast? And after that, I'm afraid we're going to have to look at modest property taxes and tax increases after that.
I don't think so, because Wallingford already has a much higher tax mill rate than people realize. I mean, when Mayor Dickinson, I know it was a long time ago, but 38 and plus years ago when he first took office, he inherited one of the single lowest tax rates in the state. And I believe we're 70th now, so barely in the top half. So we already have a high enough mill rate where we can do a lot of good work, especially when you cut down on efficiencies, which there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, for crying out loud, we spent $500K in a pool that was never going to get built under this mayor in the first place. And there's a lot of examples of that. And at the same time, with the focus of reinvesting in the community so that the property values increase, that's a great way to increase revenue without actually burdening the public with a higher percentage, right? A higher mill rate.
So let's move away from budgets and tax increases and go to another potential area of difference between you and the mayor. I think a short answer is going to be good enough for this one. Community pool. Everything that needs to be said has been said. Your position on that, if you're elected?
Everyone knows that I fully support community pool. It's economically viable. It's community. It's great for the community. I mean, community comes first in the word community pool. All I'll add, because some of the town councilors did not see eye to eye with me on this one, is that when it comes to ARPA funds, this might be the only and last opportunity where the community, I wouldn't like to use ARPA funds ideally, but it gives the town council actually more weight, in my interpretation, to, if they hold on to those ARPA funds long enough, because there's a 2-year limit essentially on appropriating them, they might actually be able to force the mayor's hand, versus even if they budgeted $7 million in the budget today, the mayor just wouldn't spend it.
I'm going to circle back to this topic in about 5 minutes, but I want to
Okay.
finish running down my list of areas of difference for you and between you and the mayor. So we covered the pool, we covered mill rates and budgets. Are there any other areas that stand out where you think you could do a better job than Mayor Dickinson?
Yeah, I think another one, and again, here's where messaging has played a stronger role than actual action, is community safety, right? So, I'm only 26, and yet very clearly in my lifetime as a young adult, I remember police officers still having to use the Wallingford Library for some of their work and research. Now, obviously, we're not there anymore today, which is, I guess, an improvement. But we've seen time and time again, even just in the last couple of years, where fortunately not so much violent crime, but crime and theft have been on the rise, where for modern issues, you need modern solutions. And it's less so about hiring more cops. I mean, we do need obviously fill the vacancies we have, but and the police chief has said this, it's about having the resources, even just permission to use better technology. There's state-of-the-art notification and communication with the public software that they've requested, that they have not heard back from the mayor, nor do I expect them to, or if at least they've advocated for. And they can't even, which isn't surprising, because they can't even get permission for a Facebook page, right? Let alone state-of-the-art technology. So I think that's where, listen, you can talk about how much safety is important to you all you want, but I think the public, is long overdue for actually seeing some action on that, that they're crying out for, frankly. And it's well within our budgets. These aren't even substantial, expenditures that we're talking about. We're talking about a few, maybe $10,000 here and there on an annual basis.
So crime hasn't been, with 2 exceptions, crime hasn't been in the news much in Wallingford. I think most folks probably feel that it's a pretty safe community and safety has not deteriorated with Mayor Dickinson. But let me stop there, because I may be wrong. Do you see it the same way?
Well, it's not a matter of how I see it. I'm just going off of the stats here, right? And I'm saying more, and this is an important distinction. Violent crime has not gone up, and that's huge. That's what's most important. But we have still seen situations that are easily addressed as part of it, where given our proximity to the highways, we've had a lot of catalytic converter theft. We've had the whole issue with Doolittle the past 2 years, where because it's off from the road without cameras there, we haven't been able to, not just, it's not even about increasing interactions between police and residents, but about, okay, you see these younger people causing trouble there, and every once in a while, then you can follow up with social services to see it addressed. And more importantly, we've had, whether it's drug use from minors or young people there, you can see it, so you can address the issue before tragedies happen. So I think it's just about giving the police department and the officers just modern resources to better, more effectively and efficiently do their jobs, which they've asked for, but they haven't received.
One thing that I recall from the news, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, was an idea that maybe Doolittle Park should have cameras, and that triggered a controversy. Some progressives actually felt that no, this invasion of privacy. Others said, no, it's a good idea. I don't know. Have you thought about that? Where do you stand on cameras at Doolittle Park to try to suppress the uncomfortable atmosphere, I guess, or maybe crime that's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not about. I can see where people are coming from. I totally can. Issues between, or conflicts between residents and police come up, not necessarily Wallingford, but all over the country, and that's obviously been a big talking point for a long time now. But by giving the police the technology to actually better carry out these jobs, and also the nice thing about cameras is you don't have to run over there if it's not immediate. Maybe it's graffiti or whatever. You can follow up through the proper, more not just effective but safer channels like social services, because you can find where these usually minors live and deal with it before it escalates, right? So I think the invasion of privacy for a public park, I don't really see that element of it as much. I mean, I can hear it, but I don't see it as much. But it's a debate for sure.
So if you were mayor, would you put in one of your early budgets money for cameras at Doolittle Park?
100%. And not because I came up with the idea, but because the police chief and police department requested it. Right? I mean, who knows better about how to keep the community safe in a lot of ways? And not just them. I mean, neighbors, when I door knocked in that community, in that part of that neighborhood, that's the first thing that people brought up is the problems with Doolittle.
Yeah.
So I think it's so much potential for a great park. It's not the only one. I don't want to focus on this one, instance, but there's just a lot of ways that we can give the police department just a little bit more technology to better carry out their jobs, I guess.
Yeah, I want to move to another item that keeps coming up when you talk about Mayor Dickinson's administration, and that is, some say it's alleged that infrastructure is deteriorating. The word infrastructure I'm not happy with. It's vague. It's not a journalistic term. It's a big bucket that anyone can imagine whatever they want, equals infrastructure. Certainly there's been a regular paving program, a sidewalk program. There's a guardrail program that's in the budgets, a street light, line item that's in the budgets. I don't know how bad is Wallingford's infrastructure? To what degree is Dickinson at fault? And what would you do to fix anything you see that's wrong?
So I'm going to be angry at myself for this because I like to be a data-driven person. And I don't have a whole lot of data on this, but I will say anecdotally, for my job, I've traveled to most of the downtowns across the state of Connecticut. And I have yet to see one in as poor a shape sidewalk-wise, and sometimes in some places road-wise, and more importantly, parking lot-wise, as Wallingford. And I don't think it's that surprising. I do think, if not all the blame, the vast majority of the blame has to fall on the mayor. So as part of my job, I've been to downtowns across the state. And again, I apologize for this being anecdotal, but I have not seen any downtowns in nearly as bad a shape, sidewalk-wise and oftentimes parking lot and road-wise, as Wallingford. And I do think the bulk of that blame has to fall on the mayor, because Public Works can only do what they have the money to do. And we already see that. I mean, we're only in May, and my understanding is because there's so many vacancies in Public Works and Electric Division, they already have used so much of their overtime that they're running out of overtime to use when the year really gets rough in terms of needing to address a lot of these issues. So this is where, again, it looks maybe great on the budget early on to have these vacancies you're not paying for. We end up paying people 1.5 per hour that they were doing before. So it goes back to budget. It's important to be addressed, and it goes back to the property values, because a bad sidewalk, a bad road, bad buildings that are falling apart don't help neighboring property values. And the last thing I'll say too, because it's the most egregious example of it, and I go to it a lot, but it's right there, is community pool. If that's an infrastructure issue, because if they just maintained it for the last 40 years, we would never be having this conversation about having to build a brand new pool. It would still be there today, more or less in the same condition that it was, 35 years ago.
Yeah, and to your point, I'm going to steal your thunder a little bit here, but hey, it's my show. I think there was an article in the Record Journal, maybe within the last 2 months, where out of the Park and Recs Commission came an assessment that the parks have never been in worse shape in years. So maybe there's not enough resources going to the parks area. Let me change the subject on something different. And you started to mention it earlier. That has to do with ARPA, the federal funding. Wallingford has a $13 million. Will in the end get about $13 million, and the town has to decide how to spend that money. We've devoted a lot of time in the Citizen Mike Show to that topic, and we're going to devote more in future episodes. But I wanted your sort of short form assessment as to where we are, how we're doing, and how do you prescribe where you think we should end up? What's the roadmap for the Riley O'Connor plan for dispensing the ARPA money?
So, and I've mentioned this at a town council meeting previously as a member of the public, but I have a problem procedurally with how the mayor's team and the town attorney's team have more or less decided that procedure has to go, where the mayor has basically unilateral, something you can't overpower, veto power. And I don't agree. I think the fact that it's a gift, I think the town council has a lot more authority than they're being given. Now they're not going to be able to hire their own attorney, or at least they're not going to try to. So I don't think it really matters. I think ultimately what the mayor decides, unfortunately, how it goes. So operating under that context, it's tough because the reality is this money should have been spent, or at least being started to being appropriated a long time ago, like just about every other town has done. And yet we're still debating the applications. We're still debating procedurally how this is even going to happen. At the same time, if the mayor's going to purposely stonewall the town council, then the town council, the only way for them to really stand up to the mayor, and in this case, stand up for what the community wants, is to participate in that game of chicken, right? Because this money has to be spent in the next 2 years, or at least appropriated in the next 2 years, or it goes back to the federal government. And I have to imagine, I mean, I've been shocked before, but I really have to imagine that regardless of how stubborn the mayor wants to be, if it comes to the last week or the last month where that money has to be spent or goes back to the federal government, then he'll allow it to be spent the way the town council sees fit.
If you had a magic wand, where would the money go?
First and foremost, and it infuriates me that we haven't done this already. The needs, the full demonstrated reasonable needs of the nonprofits should have been met months ago, because every single one of these meetings and every single one of the ARPA subcommittee meetings, I see all of the heads of every nonprofit in town. And these are folks that are everywhere. I mean, they're constantly doing charitable events all the time. I see them, 5 times a week, and they have to waste their time advocating for themselves at these meetings still, which makes even less sense, because I think the town council and hopefully the mayor are on the same page that they should get, even if you meet 100% of their demonstrated need by their own admission, it's a couple $1 million. It's not the 13 mil. So that should just be done first and foremost. After that, and this is where I disagree with, I think, much of the council, I don't think much of any money, I'm willing to compromise, but if it's just me deciding, I don't think much of any money should be going to businesses.
Because
Sure. And it's not because I hate businesses, quite the opposite. But Wallingford's already received $160 million just in PPP money to businesses in town, right? And unfortunately, now if this money was being spent a year ago when we first received it, now we're having a different conversation, because we're talking about holding businesses over through the toughest parts of the pandemic. And even though we're not on the other side yet, it's not going to change drastically, right? Like, if you survive, if your business is still around, that means you survived. And I don't think pennies, which is what this ARPA money is going to come down to if you spread it out that way, is really it might keep you up for another month, but it's not going to turn your business around. Unfortunately, I know that's hard to say, but it's true. And I think the way that can most effectively help people, first with the nonprofits, because they reach the community directly, and then once their needs are met, then through town projects, because that's something that raises property values, the most number of people in town can use. And I think it's a valiant effort, even though I don't think that's how it's going to happen. But you gave me the magic wand, so I'm taking it.
Right. I believe in magic wands, because without a magic wand, you're sort of rudderless. I mean, if you don't know what you want, then you have no idea how to get there, and you end up never getting there, and ends up being sort of in a quagmire. So I like magic wands. We use that a lot on the Citizen Mike Show. But you have your magic wand still in hand. What are some of your favorite projects? Don't list them all, because you need wiggle room. I get that. But give me a few.
So again, community pool would be top of the list. But if that money, the money can be spent a lot of other great ways. Refreshing the town parks, because like I said, they're, like you said, and like the Park and Rec Commission has said, they're in the worst shape they've ever been. And that's when people come to town, whether for their child's sporting event or whatever, the parks are usually the only part of Wallingford they see, or at least one of the major parts. And they're in horrible shape. I mean, last year, I lived right by Vietnam soccer fields, and there was a whole almost month that went by where they didn't have lines painted on the field. I mean, and they were hosting tournaments for people outside of town. I mean, so that kind of stuff. I think Tyler Mill is another great example where a little bit of money can go a long way to repairing it from the storms from a couple of years ago, really making that a destination, like it has so much potential to be. And there's a lot of other small projects. I don't really like the idea of using it for, what should be normal cap and non-recurring fund projects, like, fixing the sidewalks, fixing the roads. I think we have the money to take care of that, and we should use it that way. But for creative projects that bring real value to the town, I think I'm all for it. And maybe given the fact that, and this is the one exception to that, given the fact that Wallingford is so dramatically behind technologically wise, or with technology in town hall, I'll say, because I just made up a word there. I think this is because this is such a get out of jail free card to catch us up, and we'll really immediately get returns on those funds. I would be more than okay with spending ARPA funds on upgrading town hall.
I wanna change a subject, and we rarely in the Citizen Lake Show get into national issues, mainly because most guests just don't want to do it. I mean, it's controversial. It's, they're hot button issues sometimes. I did do a show on critical race theory. That was with Steve Knight. He's not running for office, so
I did see it.
Yeah, he has nothing to lose. He had nothing to lose on that. But it was a fun show. But I challenged you on that, and you seem to say, yeah, maybe so. So I want to, maybe a national issue or two might be okay. So there is an editorial in the latest New York Times written by one of the regular columnists, a guy called Charles Blow. And he was talking about the aftermath of the Charles Floyd killing a few years ago, and how immediately after that, Black Lives Matter, that movement sort of rose and got attention and force. But now it seems to have subsided, and there's actually some backlash against it. And I just wanted to read you a couple of lines that Mr. Blow read, because it has to do with the younger generation. And you're the only guy on the screen that sort of represents that. So I want to run this by you. This is Mr. Blow writing. He says, "I've learned not to expect much from America. It has a deep capacity for change, but a shallow desire for it. I have embraced the wise desire not to be betrayed by too much hoping, as James Baldwin put it. But I worry about," and here it comes, "but I worry about young people in all of this. It is their faith that's most vulnerable to damage. They were the ones who most believed that change was not only possible, but imminent, only to have America retreat and retrench. Now, not only are the Allies reversing course on issues like police reform, the country is also facing a full backlash toward protest itself. Dozens of states have passed laws restricting the right to protest." He gives an example or two, and more than a dozen have now criminalized teaching full and accurate racial history. But I want to go back to that earlier paragraph. The impact on the younger generation, are they going to lose faith in America's ability to change and adopt? Your thoughts?
Well, first, I'll be very brief on this aspect, but why, despite being a local municipal candidate in a tight election, why I'm always happy to answer and discuss these kind of national issues is because I'm willing to talk about anything, right? That's one of my core points, is that even if I can't affect it as a mayor, I want people to know that they're always getting an open, honest opinion and answer from me. But now in this issue in particular, I understand the sentiment of the writer, but I don't think that any level of adversity is going to, well, it might demoralize people in my generation a bit. I mean, we faced in my lifetime alone, adult lifetime alone, 2 recessions and record high inflation. But I don't think that's deterred us from fighting for change. I mean, what's the famous quote where change, freedom, and progress essentially are all hard fought, but easily lost. So, you can't give up, because it's going to take time to get this country where we hope it can be. I know it's the hope that hurts, but it's also the only thing that keeps us going. I mean, I wouldn't have run for mayor a year ago if I wasn't, maybe a lot of it was naive, but hopeful that we had a chance, and we show people that we really did. So yes, times are tough. And in this example, I think today is exactly 2 years from the death of George Floyd. And it seems, again, like an eternity and like yesterday at the same time. But I don't think people have given up, even if the momentum's not what it once was. People will keep fighting until we can be prouder of where we are.
So as a representative, just to sum up here, and then we'll call it quits for the episode, but to sum up, I sense what you're saying, or what I'm hearing is, as a representative, you're not really, yeah, you are. I'm appointing you representative of your generation. you're representative for an episode. As a representative of your generation, you don't sense that the younger folks are getting discouraged and may leave the system because of that.
There was a moment in my campaign that stuck with me more than anything else, which was I got a message, an email from someone saying it was the first time she had ever voted. I think she was 19, and she voted and registered to vote. A municipal election is a weird first election, right? Not many people at 18 or 19 enter that. And she registered to vote because she saw someone in her generation running. And I think that's my point, being that there's young people much younger than me for sure, doing great work all over the world and all over the country, and all over Wallingford for that matter. And so I think so long as people still have a reason to work hard to change things, there might be low points, there might be points of low morale, but things will get there because we're determined to get them where they need to be, where they can be.
Yeah, let's make that the final word. I appreciate you coming on the Citizen Mike Show and answering that last question, and good luck on the campaign trail. Actually, I do have a quick follow-up. So between now and the election, are you going to be going to council meetings, or how do you keep involved?
Yeah, I know it's the end of the show, so I'll keep it quick. But I'm actually at every council meeting. I don't usually. I mean, sometimes I speak up. A lot of times I kind of sit back and listen from the back because I don't want to miss anything. But I'll continue to do that. I will, and maybe I'll give you one more scoop. I will, and not that this is super wise politically because I'll be gone, but I will be gone at some point in my campaign early on for basic training for Army Reserves, which is something I want to do for well over 3 years now, well before I even decided to get in politics in the first place, and paperwork got in the way. But I'm confident that because of the momentum we have from last campaign and because of the great team, and frankly, just a great desire for change in Wallingford, will be okay until I get back. But I will still be involved, even if not here, as much as possible, because even as a member of public, we learned last year that there's a lot you can do. Well, we look forward to seeing you in uniform. Let's make that the final word. Thanks again for coming on the show. And folks, thanks for watching the Citizen Mike Show. We do appreciate it. And also check out WPAA TV. It broadcasts the Citizen Mike Show weeknights at 9 p.m. Good night, everyone. Good night, Riley. Thanks again. Thanks, Mike.